Good evening, good evening, good evening. Let me welcome you to this evening's presentation of Mango Tree Dialogues. It is the first for the year, and we look forward to having some very interesting discussions. Last year, we didn't have too much of an interface in terms of dialoguing, but this year we are hoping that we can have more persons coming on and, engaging some of the very interesting subjects, that are out there that need to be distilled, that need to be analyzed. And so we will do more of that. But I would just like to welcome you as we start this year. A year, as we know, every new year has this air of expectation. And somehow people believe that what happened in the past, if there were bad things that happened, then the year coming, the year in which we are now, would be a year of promise, a year in which things will be better. And why not? That's how the human heart is. The human heart is one that pants after new things, that seeks to discover new things, that refuses to stay buried at a particular spot, but has this expectation of new things that can break forth. And I think it happens in all human hearts. Sometimes it appears as if some people are just drifting, or as if life doesn't really have anything to offer them. But if you should just spend a few moments with people like those, you would be surprised at the wisdom that flows from their minds, from their mouths towards you. As we look back over 2024, and I have to spend a great deal of time analyzing that, but just to say that 2024 was a very interesting year. In some instances, it was a year that was filled with a lot of anxiety in many parts of the world. We have come out of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and thank God for that. That the worst, it is still around. COVID-19 is still around. It has mutated into different ways in which it is expressing itself. And but what we do know is that the virus is not as virulent as it was when it just started out. And it is not causing the level of anxiety that we had in 2020, 21, even up to 2022, when we started to get an ease in 2023 and of course 2024. But so that is largely behind us. But what has come on the scene is what I would call a virus of wars, a virus of discontent around the world. And we saw that in full display in 2024. In the Middle East, for example, we had the Hamas attack on Israel that resulted in over a thousand, almost 1,200 people slaughtered in Israel. And of course, Israel responded. And in the judgment of many people, including the International Criminal Court, including the United Nations, including human rights groups such as Amnesty International, and also in the thinking of your humble servant, because we have said it here on this program before, about the disproportionate response that Israel made in Gaza to what Hamas did in Israel. Thousands upon thousands of children slaughtered, not to mention women and the elderly. The way of life of a people, not just disturbed, but almost decimated. Because one of the charges against Israel is that they are carrying out an operation, a genocidal operation in Gaza, as if to obliterate, to wipe off, the Palestinians there from the face of the earth. And so the response has been horrific, and we still have simmering tensions. Then Israel took on Hezbollah because Hezbollah had been firing rockets into Israel, and they had to respond to that. And then Iran got dragged into it, and missiles. Israel had to deal with Iran. And I'm just giving you in a nutshell, friend, because, like I said, I don't want to get too deep into any analysis of what happened in 2024, because we say sometimes that it is best that the past is left buried, and let's deal with the present and the future. But one thing I do know, as you know, as yourself, even in your own personal life, is that there is a sense in which the past can continue to haunt us in the present. And that is largely a result of things in the past not having been attended to or dealt with. And now you have to face them in the new year, in the present. So insofar as the past impacts the present and influences the future, we've got to be concerned. And so, as I was saying, the tension there is still very palpable. And it's one of the things we talk about, the geopolitical tensions in the world, and tensions in different parts of the world. And it is in the Middle East that we're going to find one of those areas that continues to be a simmering cauldron of hate. I have remarked on this program before that, I wouldn't even say it is interesting, but it is it leaves you with a sense of distress that part of the world in which some people describe it as the cradle of civilization, but a place where the three major religions of the world today, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the three of them, were born. They were born out of that milieu. They were born out of the cradle of, let's say, Palestine, or in the Middle East. That in that land there can be so much hatred. And if you look at the presentations of our three religions coming out of the stock of Abraham, one of the cardinal points that underpins all three of them is their regard for the neighbor, love for the neighbor. You would never believe that that is the case in the way that we practice the kind of hatred we do in all three religions. And I'm not going to single out any to be having any kind of superiority over the other. But all three of them spewing this kind of hatred at different points. Christianity has had its problems, and we could probably deal with that another time. Islam, we know, has had its problems. Israel, from the very beginnings in the Old Testament, has always had to be warding off and fighting off enemies. So much blood has been spilled in that part of the world. The soil is soaked with the blood of innocent people from way back, almost 5 centuries or 6 centuries or so, and counting. In the name of God, I wonder which God that is. By the way, because I can really go to town on that. That is not our purpose here this evening. So let me just stay with the script. My wife would tell me, stay with the script, Ralston. All right, so we have that in the Middle East, and then we have Putin continuing with his own carnage in the Ukraine. That is going to be a very interesting development this year with Donald Trump taking over the presidency here in the United States. Already there is some kind of suggestion that, well, he has stated very categorically that on day one, on day one, he'll get the war to end. Probably just call up Putin and Zelensky and say to them, listen, guys, call it off. I wish it were that simple. But we're going to have a problem still. I believe that Russia is backpedaling in many respects. And one of the big reasons for saying so is that he has had to enlist the North Koreans to assist him in dealing with the Ukrainians. What a thing. A so-called major power like that, once a superpower, going over there to Kim Jong-un, North Korea, a pariah. Really, Kim Jong-un, a non-entity when you really look at it in the world in terms of political leadership and leadership of nations. And he has had to go there to solicit help from him. And now his men, he has sent soldiers, North Korean soldiers, over into the battle there between Russia and the Ukraine. We see how that turns out because a number of them are being killed. It has been estimated that close to 2,000 of them have been killed already. So you wonder what is going to happen there. But the world cannot really wait to see the back of that war. It is so senseless. The kind of megalomania that you see expressed by Putin that caused it in the first place. And that will continue to cause problems down the road for the world. So we hope that somehow Trump, because he's going to be very central to it, will be able to carry out some magic and bring an end to that carnage. And then we also have China, on the other hand, that is posturing itself. But China is in trouble, economic trouble. They handled the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, very badly. And they were going for, I think, at the time, I'm trying to recall, they were going for a no COVID case policy. So they shut down the country. At the time when other places were opening up, they were shutting down. They were well shut down. But outside of that, there have been problems developing in the economy. They went on a big building boom that whole cities were created into concrete jungles. And the promissory notes came in to be paid. And all the loans and borrowed money that went into these projects have, some of these big building companies, I think Evergreen was one of them, have failed. And the banks themselves have found themselves in trouble. And so there is happening now in the Chinese economy a kind of problem where Xi Jinping has had to be daily, has to be daily preoccupied with what is happening there. I have a very strong feeling that if it was not, if the economy was robust enough, he would have probably gone into Taiwan to take over Taiwan. But his hands are full at home, and he'd better deal with that because he's dealing with the biggest middle class in the entire world, over 600 million. It is twice the Chinese middle class is twice the population of the US. Think about that. You better keep your eyes on that, Mr. Xi Jinping, because you're going to have that to deal with when they become restless because of economic hardships. You know, one thing that Deng Xiaoping did in revolutionizing the Chinese economy is that he has opened up possibilities to people. And many have become rich as a result of that. That's the untold story. You know, we don't know the number of millionaires, and we see some of the billionaires like Jack Ma of Alibaba fame, and many others that we don't even know of. And one thing you can do when people get that level of, awareness and economic independence in a way. And that's why, communism is really a sham there now as it is. It is just a word, you know. In real practice, they're capitalist, but they're trying to graft capitalism onto the body of some old past when it suits them to bring repression against the people. So that's a very interesting thing. But I don't see that we can worry too much. I don't think so about what is going to happen in Taiwan and so on with China saber rattling. And then here comes Mr. Trump, and he's breathing out threatenings as Paul did against the Christians, against certain powers, certain countries. Panama, for example, wanting to stir up trouble there, taking on Mexico, but I think he has met his match in the female president of Scheinbaum, a Jewish lady who took over power there in Mexico recently. He has met his match with her. One thing he doesn't seem to be able to stomach are strong women like that. So I notice he's backed off, but he's taken on Trudeau in Canada, even musing that he could get Canada to be the 51st state. What a temerity. But look how Trudeau has responded. He's in trouble in Canada because, of the way, in a way, that he was in trouble before politically, but it has been exacerbated, made worse by him going down to Mar-a-Lago and kowtowing to Trump. And if you do that, then what do you expect? The man must try to want to use you as a kind of walking mat. Well, we see how that goes. But I'll have something more to say about the US a little later on, because as you know, on this program, we talk about the things in the international sphere, and particularly in the US, and certainly in the Caribbean diaspora, of which Jamaica is the foremost one that I talk about on this program. So we'll say some more about where the US is now as they enter into, as the country enters into a new phase of government with the upcoming inauguration of Trump as the 47th president of the US. Oh, yeah, my wife has just dropped me a little note here that the Israeli attack was 2023 and not 2024, and she's correct as usual. So thank her for that correction. All right, so let me go to Jamaica. And this evening, friends, we're just into random jottings, so to speak. A number of things are on my mind, and I just want to talk to you analyzing very quickly and briefly some of these things that are happening. I thought that I should have started out with the geopolitical thing around the world because however we slice it or dice it, the world has been so narrowed, what they call globalized. It's such a village now for true that what happens in some far flung region of the world affects others on the other end of it. I didn't even talk about the evolving conflicts in Africa, one of the richest areas of the world in terms of natural resources, mineral deposits, and so on, but having a problem with governance. And the Sudan is being torn apart, problems in Nigeria, all over the place. You're having all kinds of problems. I could talk about Haiti. I could talk about the problems Cuba is facing and all that sort of thing. We've touched on some of those things last year, so you know what we're talking about there. So let me go to Jamaica for a while and talk about what's going to be happening there, at least for 2025. 2024 was a year, when you talk to many people, many Jamaicans, the most they tell you, boy, Christmas just crept upon me. It crept upon me too. Before you look around, man, 2 weeks before Christmas. And so I do hope that, and speaking generally, that you all had a very good Christmas, a very good celebration. We are not to deny people of the things that they want to indulge in Christmas, and one should never be a Grinch that steals anybody's joy in the way that they choose to celebrate Christmas. And so I hope that whichever way in which you did, that it was a time of real gathering with your family and your friends as you share a moment. Christmas, coming down into the Christmas season, is that time of the year that just allows you to, lie back a little and just relax, or, do some of the things that you were not able to do throughout the year as you come into the holiday period and are able to back off a little and relax. So I hope you did that, and you reflected too, those of you for whom Christmas is not just a holiday. It's not that's the 25th of November, being the birth of our Lord. And let me say something quickly about that, because I heard somebody talking about it not long ago again, and I've written about it in the past. I don't know why, we don't celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December as the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. So we don't celebrate Christmas because it is not the birth of our Lord. Let me tell you something, friends. We don't need to worry too much about a date. I don't think anybody knows precisely exactly when Jesus came into the world. All that the Bible tells us is that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. And Paul writing said that, he was born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law. And nobody talked about any precise date. That is not important. What is important is that he came and the reasons that he came. So we don't need to get het up about dates and be foolish enough to say you don't celebrate it because you don't see the 25th of December as the time of his birth. I don't think he was born on the 25th of December, but whether we celebrate it then or we celebrate it the 5th of October or the 6th of June, my birthday, is immaterial. And let's not get so taken up with it. Let's hope that you felt the peace and the mercy and the grace that he came into the world to bring you. As we go into Easter and the overcoming of evil by his death on the cross. That is what is important, to put your life in a new perspective, give your life a new sense of dawn. Anyway, all right, so let's hope you did have a good time. And New Year's Day, yesterday, that you also had a good time with your families and friends. People tend to go to the beach, I know, in Jamaica, and dances and all the other things. But now it's time to work, right? After the playing, there has to be work. And there's not as much fun in work as there is in playing. I get it. But we have some very serious things to contend with in 2025 in Jamaica. To begin with, it is going to be an election year. It is a general election where we elect the parliament of the land, and out of that, the prime minister is selected, and usually the leader of the political party that wins becomes the prime minister. So that's a given. It's not a constitutional given, but that is the conventional way in which it has been ever since 1962 anyway. So we are going to be faced with an election. And so the question is, when we have an election, any general election in Jamaica, tends to be fraught with a lot of anxiety on the part of many people. You know, we talk about the tribal divisions, the political tribal divisions in the country. And it is very real. People defend their sides very strongly. And, but one thing we have to be grateful for is that the violence of the past, the political violence of the past, especially in 1980, when over 800 people were murdered in the name of seeking political power by both political parties. None of them had a clean hand in it. The Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National Party. We know that we have had a history of violence, but thanks be to God that that is very much behind us now. And we have had cleaner elections because we have been able to deal with the whole electoral process in such a way that it is the envy of many countries in the world. As a matter of fact, Jamaica has had to go to different countries to help people to set up their own systems because we have become a model, and that is to be cherished. There is talk about entrenching the Electoral Commission in the Constitution, and that ought to be done. And I hope it's going to be done as what they call a deep clause, where you just don't get rid of it unless you're going to go back to the people about it with a 2/3 majority and go back to the people for vote. Because it has served us well. And it has been responsible for one of the main things that has been responsible for the diminution, the lessening of the political violence in the country. And we must be proud of that achievement. So as the politicians get going, and there's not a great deal in terms of policy or things that they are going to get done. I'm not holding my breath that there's anything far-reaching that is going to be done. The budget has to be dealt with by the 15th of April. And I guess by the end of March, that would have been taken care of. And that, I think, between this month and March, that we'll have perhaps the most things done in terms of policy and real governance. But to see after that, because the elections have to be called by the September 2025, this year, by September of this year. Constitutionally, the government, if there's an emergency, can extend it for a further 3 months. But that has to be well justified. Like I said, an emergency. We're losing a sense of what an emergency is nowadays because we are every so often get a flare up of violence in one part of the country. The government applies a state of emergency to deal with it. So that, I have talked about that here many times, and I'm very strongly committed to the view still. They tell you that they save lives. Yes, they save lives, but there are other things that you need to look at. And if you keep on using that as a tool to fight crime, when the real emergency comes, people might just take it for granted, or just say, well, what's in an emergency? We've been having so many of them. it's like confetti. So, that's a concern that I've always had. But it's only if you have a real emergency, like an earthquake, for example. Let me put that bluntly, that the government can extend it for another 3 months. And that rarely, I can't recall of it ever happening. If it has happened, I would ask somebody to tell me. So by September 2025, the elections have to come. And usually the government tends to call in whose remit, the prime minister, in whose remit the power is to call elections. And that's something else, again, that needs to be dealt with. He sometimes they call it a good time before the actual time when it is due. But I think this time around, the prime minister is going to play for some time because there are some projects that have been rolled out in the road improvement, what they're calling the Spark program, which is really an acronym talking to the rehabilitation of the road network in the country, which is in an abysmal state. You drive on many roads in that country, if you're not careful, you are falling into not just a pothole, but a pond. And like how rains are falling, you may drown. People's cars. I heard of a man whose car, all four tires were blown out because he fell into one of these ponds. So we have to give the government, and I've done it here too, congratulations in a sense in rolling out this program. It started this month. There are roads that have been selected and they're working on these roads. And so we'll see how far they will get before the elections roll around. And there are people, you cannot escape people saying that that the road program is a political thing done by the government in order to win votes. But this is something that the government had been talking about for a very long time. This didn't just happen overnight. For the past 2 years or more, they have been talking about it, planning it, getting the money together, $45 billion of taxpayers' money, not borrowed money, not Paris Club money, not money from any bilateral source, not from the IDB or any of those sources. Our money paid for. So they've been planning this. And it so happens that, well, they could have calculated it to come around this time. Who knows? That's a calculation they could have made. But don't tell me that they just come up with it now, just throwing money out there in order to win political points, because that wouldn't be true. That wouldn't be true because they have been talking about it a good while, putting everything in place. You don't put $45 billion together in 6 months to start a road program. No. So let's see how that goes. And whether, as far as I'm concerned, whether they had political consideration or they didn't have political consideration, if you have good roads now that you can drive up and drive on and do your business, frankly, I'm not gonna lose any sleep over that. All right, still with Jamaica. One of the big things that has to be, it's a continuing problem, is the whole matter of the crime that is out there. You know, friends, despite the problems that we have had with crime and the mass shootings, which frighteningly are becoming a bit too frequent, we have to step on that. We have problems of a nature that the crime problem is of a nature that is makes some Hollywood movies look tame, or Netflix movies look tame. But the police ought to be congratulated. I don't think we appreciate enough the work that the police have to do and the danger that they put themselves in having to do the work. How many people knew, with all the headlines that we are hearing about crime and killings and so on, how many people knew that for 2024, we had a reduction in the number of murders in the country by almost 300 compared to the year before? At the end of December, almost 300 less. It means that the police are getting better at their jobs, and they really are, because they've been the intelligence capabilities of the force have been enhanced. Former Commissioner of Police Anderson did a very good job in seeing to that, and that is being continued with by Dr. Blake, who has succeeded him as commissioner. And one thing they're onto are the gangs. As something happens, they're onto them, the criminals. I see how quickly they apprehended the person who killed Barbara Gale, that intrepid and consummate journalist. And let me just pause and pay tribute to her for the work that she has done, lifting the standards of journalism and showing, especially young journalists, how it is done. Her court reporting has been legendary. And it's very sad that she had to go the way she did. She never deserved it. Nobody deserves the kind of horrific death that was visited upon her. So I'd like to wish her friends and her family members all the best as they mourn her loss. Certainly the journalistic fraternity for losing one of their luminaries. But I would like to predict that in 2025, this year, we're going to see a further tamping down of the murders. Because one thing the criminals know is that if they can be caught, they tend to be a bit more cautious about what they do. And they're being caught and they're being watched. The surveillance capability of the force has been enhanced, and their mobility to move to deal with crime has been enhanced. So more kudos to them. And the police can't do it alone. We all have to chip in and do our part. Inform where you can. There are phone lines that are dedicated to this, and if you don't want to call them because you think the police are corrupt, talk to your pastor and say, boy, I know so-and-so, and let him do it. I don't think he'd do anything to inform on you. But vigilance, community vigilance has got to be the hallmark of getting that information to the law enforcement. They don't have eyes and ears and feet everywhere. So all of us who do collectively, let us play our part and don't just curse them because you need them. A man is breaking down in your house, you think you're gonna call out to the neighbor, you want to call police, police. We despise them, yes, because many of them, some of them are corrupt. And I say every profession has their corrupt people. But by and large, they're putting their lives on the line and their families' lives because when they're killed, a breadwinner goes, a husband goes, or a wife, or a sister, or a brother. Disrupts families. So let's help them as best we can. All right. And then the last thing that I'd want to mention, I was going to say something about constitutional reform, but I'm going to leave that for another time. But I just want to mention economic growth very quickly because, as I said, the election is not going to allow for a great deal of things to happen. But I remember the Prime Minister gave out some parameters that he wants to embark on to enhance economic growth. Everybody is agreed that the fiscal strength of the country is good, that the reckless way in which the economy was tarnished in the past, that is very much behind us. But there are very serious headwinds if we're going to get the coveted economic growth that we're talking about. Very serious headwinds. And one of those big headwinds is the productivity index of our people, the output of jobs that we are called on to perform. Jamaica still lags behind the Caribbean as the only country, as the country with the lowest productivity. It shows up in every area. And another thing that has to be watched is the bureaucracy that stifles businesses. I mean, many people don't even embark on businesses because it's too much of a headache. Too much areas of taxation and too many hoops that they have to jump through before they can get started. It costs them a great deal of money before they can even put a shovel in the ground. And those agencies, government agencies, and the civil service as a whole, where people are not being productive, again, if you have low productivity, you're going to get all kind of shoddy treatment of the public. And that is what you're getting. So ways have got to be found where we can enhance the education of those who provide these services to the public in the civil service. Increase productivity, training, ongoing training, motivation, so that people can get to a better place in the job that they perform. All right. And then very quickly then, as I said, let me just say something quickly about the United States as a country enters into a new era of Donald Trump. Inauguration is on the 20th of January, 20th of this month, and then he will be king of all that he surveys, or so he thinks. He has been putting together a cabinet and of a certain caliber that has frightened many people, has caused anxiety among many people because of the kind of people that he's wanting to surround himself with. It is very apparent that he's concerned about surrounding himself with billionaires, and it would appear as if there is a desire to create a kind of oligarchic class where the rich are endowed with more wealth and more power so that they can dominate the society. All of that is to be watched and watched very carefully. We have seen the posturing of the president-elect because that is what he is, although he's behaving as if he's the president. And I'd wonder if folks recall, and it's there in the archives, That at one point I said that he's not even going to wait until he's inaugurated to really start acting as president. And every day you see it. The way he's threatening tariffs and getting the limelight, putting himself out there, throwing raw meat all over the place to be seen. Those are all part of, making noise when you should be busy dealing with the transition that you're supposed to be coming up with on the 20th. But no, he has to be heard, he has to be seen. The threatened mass deportation of people is one that has to be very carefully watched because, I don't think they know the extent. And certainly, I shouldn't even say I don't think. I know that they don't know the extent of the carnage and the dislocation to the economy and to people's lives that such a mass deportation would cause. But I don't think it's gonna happen. not not in the way that the czar, immigration czar, the border czar, Homan, is hoping that it will happen because that thing is very expensive. It's gonna take money. And he thinks that Congress is just going to dole out money. The Senate might be so disposed, but in the House where you have just one vote difference, you're going to have all of your guys lined up behind that kind of carnage, behind that kind of going out into communities, whether it's, especially if you're doing it with soldiers, to frighten people. It's not going to work. So I don't think, people make up a lot of noise. But you see, when you have the responsibility in your hand, it's good. It's one thing to stay in the pavilion and look at the players playing on the field. But when you have to be on the field and you have to deliver goals, you have to get the ball into the net. You think it's easy? So I hear all the posturing and what one is going to do and this is going to do. Be my guest. Be my guest. Because you're going to run up against some serious opposition. But people are not just going to sit down quietly. They're going to get things into the courts and stop you. Right now, tomorrow is the day when they will choose the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And that is not even determined how it is going to go. Trump has thrown his backing behind Johnson, the sitting Speaker. But there are others inside there, Mark, not a lot of them so far, just a few who are saying, but what about the quiet ones who will not support Johnson? So he just might not get a vote in. And they just might not have a speaker by the time he's inaugurated on the 20th. So these things are fast-moving targets. And nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. So we'll see how tomorrow goes. But if they get into the same problems that they have had with McCarthy and the others in the past, they're going to be in for a very serious reckoning. And this time, when they do not have a fair enough majority that they can pass laws or do anything without being dependent upon the Democrats to help them out. And I hope the Democrats have learned their lesson. Yes, it is for the good of the country, but when they come with all these, frankly stupid laws and ways of behaving that will dislocate the country and divide the country further, I hope they stand up and say, we're not going to have it. We're not going to lend our support to it. In terms of the retribution that has been promised, one of the things that people who probably lose their jobs, who probably in the media fraternity, who might be harassed because they cannot say certain things, they're going to be sued. And that's one thing that I think is going to become very rampant. The rich, Musk and the rest of them, along with Trump. They may try to use their muscles, their wealth muscles, to sue people because they know that that is one of the best way. Once somebody sues you, got to get a lawyer, and it is not cheap. So, what I would like to say to folks is that support organizations like the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. They look after human rights and help people who are not able to help themselves, but they need donations. That organization is one that you wouldn't want to support at this time because they're gonna be very busy defending people and they're gonna need the resources. I can see that coming. All right, so we'll see what happens on the 20th. And very interestingly, what Mr. Trump has been promising on the campaign trail that he'll do on day one. As I've said in the past, day one for him is a time of decision when a great deal of things will have to be done. And I believe the most things, of course, that will be done is the signing of executive orders about a myriad of things that they will begin right from day one to want to deal with regulations and all those sort of things. So be prepared. And I hope the lawyers are sharpening their pencils. That as he comes with one of these hairy-fairy type of policies that's going to hurt the country, boom, get it in the courts. Because that's the only way you're going to be blocking him. Because if you have a dysfunctional Congress in that they can't get a speaker, you think Trump is just going to sit around and wait on them? He's just going to try to use executive orders to get his way. And the only way you're going to stop him is by hitting him in the courts right away. As he says something, you get it in the courts. And I hope that the courts will have the wisdom to see the folly of the policies that may be enshrined in these executive orders. All right. I've said a lot. I've said a lot. I'm going to leave it there. And all I'd want to do now is to really wish for you a very productive, a very healthy, yes, and a very prosperous. I don't like to just glibly tell people, have a prosperous new year now. But if you do the things that are right, prosperity, and you get prosperous, and prosperity for me is not just having a big bank account or having a lot of money. Prosperity is having good health. To be healthy is to be wealthy. I know a lot of wealthy people who don't have good health, and they wish that they could use some of that wealth to purchase health. It doesn't work, whether mentally or physically. So as you go into the new year, understand that resolutions will be made, but I would advise, and I would beg you as I beg myself and urge myself, not to make resolutions that make life a bit more complicated than it ought to be. Life at its best already is very complicated. So just bite things off in small morsels. It is easier to spell cow than to spell mosquito. And you see the size of the animals. A big cow and a small mosquito. And it is easier to spell the big animal than the small mosquito. So take things easy. Bite things off in small morsels. Don't try to gouge the entire bread down your throat, because you'll come back in 2026 gasping for breath. That doesn't make sense. Set yourself realistic goals, what you can achieve, what you can attain, and be resolute about attaining them. Go after them. If it's just one, you accomplish in the year, then fine. But don't be bothered running all over the place like a jackrabbit and not achieving anything. It doesn't make sense at all. And while you're at it, help someone along the way. It will be good for your soul. I know it's good for my soul whenever I help somebody, especially somebody in need. And I can see the change that has come over the person. We are all placed on this planet, not to be islands unto ourselves, but to embrace the full breadth and depth of humanity and to leave the world, our little space, a little better than we found it. So happy New Year to you. Prosperous New Year. Resolute New Year. Healthy New Year. And may God in his wisdom help you as you seek to walk good. Good night and see you next time. Bye-bye.